Eternal Blood与 Forbidden Love. Chapter 1, The Rainy Night Encounter. The rain in Willowbrook never fell gently. It came down in cold, silver sheets, slashing against the dark forest canopy, drowning the entire small town in a thick, misty gray. The autumn night wind beat sharply, carrying the damp rotten leaf smell of the mountain forest, wrapping every living thing in a cold and suffocating silence. Lila Moore had her thin canvas coat tightly, her sneakers sinking into the muddy forest path step by step. Her long chestnut hair was soaked by the rain, sticking messily to her pale cheeks, and her eyelashes were covered with fine cold raindrops, blurring her vision. She had made a stupid, impulsive decision tonight. She had quarreled with her dorm roommate before dusk, tired of the noisy and trivial disputes in the dormitory. She wanted to take a walk to relax, but she was so distracted that she unknowingly walked out of the town's residential area and stepped into the forbidden old forest, on the outskirts of Willowbrook. The locals always warned outsiders not to enter the mountain forest after dark. They said the forest was haunted, that there was an old abandoned castle on the top of the mountain, where a mysterious lonely stranger lived all year round. No one had ever seen his face clearly, no one knew his origin. The townsfolk whispered that the man was cold and weird, that no one could approach him, and that anyone who broke into his territory would encounter terrible misfortune. Lila had always thought those were just old-fashioned rural ghost stories, silly and superstitious. Until tonight. The sky was completely dark, the surrounding woods were dead silent, only the rustle of rain hitting leaves and her trembling heavy breathing. The phone in her pocket had long lost signal, the screen was black from the rain, and she couldn't tell the direction at all. Panic climbed up her spine little by little, cold and dense. She was an orphan who had grown up alone, used to being lonely and strong, but at this moment, in the endless dark rainy forest, all her courage collapsed completely. Her legs became weak and sore from running blindly, her knee hit a sharp tree root heavily, and a sharp pain swept through her whole body. She stumbled and fell on the muddy ground, cold muddy water soaking her clothes in an instant, piercing her skin. "Damn it!" Lila whispered hoarsely, her eyes turning red uncontrollably. The wound on her knee was bleeding, the warm blood mixed with cold rainwater, flowing down her calf. The cold temperature made her shiver violently, and her physical strength was rapidly draining. She knew she was in trouble. The forest was too big, the night was too dark, and no one would come to find her. She might stay here all night, be trapped in this cold mountain forest, and even lose her life in this unknown darkness. Dizziness began to attack her brain, her vision became more and more blurred, and the whole world was spinning in front of her eyes. She bit her lower lip hard, trying to stay awake, but the cold and exhaustion were like endless tides, swallowing her little by little. Just when her consciousness was about to fall into darkness completely, a faint sound of footsteps suddenly came from the quiet forest. It was not the hurried and heavy footsteps of ordinary people. The footsteps were extremely light, slow and steady, without any sound of stepping on mud, as if the owner of the footsteps was walking on the flat ground easily in this muddy rainy night, without being affected by the harsh environment at all. Lila's frozen nerves tensed instantly. She forced herself to raise her head, her blurred eyes staring at the depths of the dark forest. Through the hazy rain curtain, a tall figure slowly walked out of the shadow of the trees. The man was standing in the rain, his figure tall and straight, like a perfectly carved ancient sculpture, cold and elegant, isolated from all the trivial darkness of the world. He wore a long black woolen coat, the fabric was smooth and thick, not stained with a single drop of rain. The long coat fell to his ankles, fluttering slightly in the night wind, with a cold and noble sense of alienation. His hair was jet black, slightly messy by the wind, hanging on both sides of his pale jaw. His skin was frighteningly white, whiter than the misty rain in the night, almost transparent, forming a sharp and shocking contrast with his black clothes. The most striking thing was his eyes. Deep, cold, dark red like aged ruby, hidden in the shadow of his eyelashes, staring at her quietly from a distance. There was no warmth in those eyes, no curiosity, no pity. Only endless cold indifference, like a person watching a trivial and struggling in the mud, distant and ruthless. Lila's heartbeat stopped for a second. An indescribable sense of terror enveloped her whole body. This man is not ordinary. He exuded a cold, ancient, dangerous aura that she had never felt in her life, a powerful oppressive force that belonged to non-human beings, silent and deadly. She wanted to back away, wanted to run, but her body was completely stiff, unable to move at all. All her strength was drained, and she could only lie weakly on the muddy ground, staring at the slowly approaching stranger in panic. The man walked step by step in the rain, his every move elegant and slow, with a unique sense of ritual that transcended time. He stopped half a meter away from her, looking down at her embarrassed and fragile appearance. His line of sight swept over her bleeding knee, over her pale trembling lips, over her foggy brown eyes full of fear. A faint, almost imperceptible fluctuation flashed in his deep red eyes. He could smell it. The scent. Pure, sweet, warm mortal blood, unique and unparalleled in the world, floating in the cold rainy air, piercing his senses sharply. It was the most tempting thing he had smelled in 300 years of eternal life. Elias was suppressed, the violent bloodthirsty desire surging in his throat in an instant. His fangs trembled slightly under his lips, craving for the sweet blood in front of him crazily. His vampire instinct was roaring, letting him grab this fragile mortal girl in front of him, bite her neck, and taste the purest blood in the world. But reason suppressed all madness. He had endured 300 years of loneliness and hunger, and he would not ruin everything for a moment of desire. Especially, this girl's blood was special. Unique pure mortal blood, the only natural antidote to his family's eternal vampire curse. He stared at her quietly, his cold voice flowing out in the rainy night, low, magnetic, with a cold hoarseness that belonged only to long-lived immortals, unfamiliar and charming. Who are you? His voice was not loud, but it penetrated the sound of rain perfectly, falling clearly in Lila's ears. Lila's throat was dry and tight. She stared at his cold and perfect face, her voice trembling badly. I got lost. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to break into your territory. I'll leave right away. She tried to struggle to stand up, but as soon as she exerted force, the severe pain from her knee made her gasp, and her body swayed and fell back again. The moment she was about to hit the mud, a cold powerful arm suddenly reached out and held her waist firmly. The cold touch came through the thin shirt, icy and cool, completely different from the warm body temperature of ordinary humans. Lila's whole body froze. She leaned against his arms weakly, clearly feeling the powerful strength hidden under his cold coat, and the cold ancient aura that wrapped her tightly. He lowered his head slightly, his deep red eyes staring straight into her flustered brown eyes. The distance between them was extremely close. Raindrops fell between them, time seemed to freeze at this second. You're hurt. Elias's tone was flat, without any emotion, but his eyes were locked on her bleeding knee. The blood sent in the air became more and more intense, stirring his calm reason repeatedly. I'm fine, Lila bit her lip, trying to pretend to be calm, but her trembling voice betrayed her fear and tension. Elias did not speak again. He bent down slightly, without any redundant movement, and directly picked up the fragile girl in his arms. His movements were gentle, but his strength was irresistible. Lila was held firmly in his arms, her head subconsciously leaning against his cold chest. There was no heartbeat in his chest. No warm body temperature. Only endless coldness, and a faint unique cold wood fragrance, ancient and mysterious, wrapping her whole body. Lila's heart beat violently, panic and a strange ambiguous throbbing intertwined in her chest, making her mind blank. She didn't know who this man was, didn't know where he was going to take her, didn't know what fate was waiting for her. She only knew that from the moment she met this cold, mysterious stranger in the rainy night, her ordinary, trivial mortal life was completely broken. The forbidden fate between a 327-year-old immortal vampire and an ordinary mortal girl had quietly kicked off in this cold, rainy night in Willowbrook. Elias held her in his arms, turned and walked towards the dark mountain top. His steps were still steady and light, walking through the rain and fog, towards the ancient castle hidden in the deepest part of the forest. The red eyes hidden in the dark were cold and deep, with suppressed desire, hidden pain, and a trace of uncontrollable sinking that he had never noticed. He had avoided mortals for hundreds of years, resisted all blood temptations, and guarded his lonely eternal life rigidly. But tonight, in this rainy night, he picked up a mortal girl who was destined to ruin his eternity. Chapter R, The Cold Castle, the Mysterious Immortal. The ancient castle on the top of Willowbrook Mountain had stood here for 300 years. It was built of dark gray ancient stone, covered with thick climbing vines all year round. The spires pierced the gray rainy sky, quiet and desolate, like a forgotten ancient relic, isolated from all the hustle and bustle of the mortal world. No mortal had ever stepped into this castle. Until tonight. Elias pushed open the heavy old iron door of the castle with one hand. The iron door made a low dull creak, breaking the long silence of the castle for hundreds of years. The interior of the castle was vast and empty, with high vaulted ceilings, dark vintage chandeliers, and long silent corridors. The air was cold and dry, with a faint old ancient dust smell, without any trace of mortal life. He put Lila gently on the soft velvet sofa in the hall, his cold fingers never touching her skin again after putting her down, as if he was deliberately keeping a distance. Lila sat on the sofa cautiously, her eyes looking around the huge and gloomy castle hall nervously. Every decoration here was old and luxurious, with the traces of time precipitation that modern society does not have. Vintage oil paintings hung on the stone walls. The characters in the paintings had pale faces and deep eyes, looking cold and strange under the dim light. The whole castle was quiet enough to hear the sound of her own breathing. "Stay here." Elias left a cold sentence, then turned and walked towards the dark corridor. His tall figure disappeared into the shadow of the corridor in an instant, leaving Lila alone in the empty hall. Lila sat stiffly on the sofa, her heart still beating fast. The cold touch left on her waist still remained, and the strange cold wood fragrance lingered on the tip of her nose, making her unable to calm down for a long time. She didn't understand why this dangerous and mysterious stranger saved her, why he brought her to this strange castle. He was cold, alienated, full of unknown dangers, but he did not hurt her. On the contrary, his every move was restrained, even gentle. 10 minutes later, Elias came back. He held a clean white towel and a bottle of wound medicine in his hand. He walked in front of Lila and knelt down on one knee. His tall figure bent down, his eyes level with her injured knee. Lila's breath stagnated, and she subconsciously wanted to retract her legs. "Don't move." His low voice was light but commanding, making her involuntarily freeze. Elias stretched out his cold slender fingers, gently lifted her trouser legs, exposing the scratched and bleeding knee. His fingers were extremely cold, touching her warm skin lightly, bringing a trembling electric current, spreading from the knee to the whole body. Lila's ears turned red instantly, and her whole body became stiff and hot, not daring to look down at his movements, so she could only stare at the dark stone wall in a panic. He cleaned the muddy blood on her wound carefully with a towel, his movements extremely gentle, completely different from his cold and indifferent appearance. The cold towel wiped the wound, slightly painful, but more of a strange subtle numbness. "You live in this castle alone?" Lila couldn't help but ask in a low voice, trying to break the awkward silence. There was no response. Elias seemed not to hear her question, focused on treating her wound, his red eyes drooping, covering all his emotions. "Are you from here?" she asked again stubbornly. This time, Elias finally raised his eyes. His deep red eyes stared at her quietly, the dim light reflecting in his eyes, beautiful and dangerous. I have lived here longer than this tongue. His voice was flat, without any fluctuation, but it made Lila's heart tremble slightly. Longer than the tongue. Willowbrook tongue has a history of 200 years. This sentence implicitly told her that his age was far beyond her imagination. A strange chill climbed up Lila's spine again, but it was mixed with uncontrollable curiosity and fascination. He was like a mystery wrapped in cold darkness, dangerous and attractive, making her want to stay away but unable to help approaching. After treating the wound, Elias stood up, put the medicine aside, and looked down at her. The rain won't stop tonight. You stay here tonight. Tomorrow morning, I will send you back to the town. Lila looked up at him, her brown eyes clean and soft. Thank you for saving me. Elias's red eyes flickered slightly. He stared at her clean mortal eyes, at her warm pale face, at the sweet blood scent that was still floating on her body. For 300 years, he had seen countless mortals, all greedy, frightened, hypocritical, or humble. No mortal had ever looked at him like this, clean, grateful, without extreme fear, without greedy speculation. Only pure and soft gratitude. It made his long-frozen heart, which had been silent for 300 years, have a faint subtle fluctuation. It's nothing. He turned his eyes away abruptly, hiding all his emotions, his tone returning to cold indifference. Don't walk into the forest alone at night again. Next time, no one will save you. His warning was cold and ruthless, but Lila could hear a trace of kindness in it. She nodded obediently. I know. I won't do it again. The night passed quietly. Elias arranged a warm guest room for Lila. The room was clean and tidy, with soft bedding, completely different from the cold and desolate appearance of the castle. Lila lay on the bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. The image of the man with pale skin and red eyes kept appearing in her mind, and his cold voice and gentle movements kept lingering in her ears. She didn't know his name, didn't know his identity, didn't know anything about him. But she knew she would never forget this rainy night encounter in her life. The next morning, the rain stopped. The sun pierced through the thick clouds, spilling soft light on the mountain forest, dispelling the cold darkness of last night. When Lila walked out of the guest room, she saw Elias standing alone in front of the castle's floor-to-ceiling window. The morning light fell on his tall figure, plating a faint light on his black coat. His pale face was more transparent in the sun, and his red eyes were dim, hiding all darkness and desire. He was afraid of the sun. Lila noticed this detail subtly. The sun made him uncomfortable, made him instinctively alienated and resistant. You're awake. Elias turned around, his expression still cold. I'll send you back. On the way down the mountain, they walked side by side on the quiet forest path. The morning wind was fresh, blowing Lila's long hair. She looked at the tall man beside her, and finally plucked up the courage to ask the question she had hidden all night. What's your name? Elias's footsteps paused slightly. He was silent for a few seconds, then slowly spit out two words, low and magnetic. Elias. My name is Lila. She smiled softly, her eyes bright and warm. Elias, I hope I can see you again. Elias stared at her bright smiling face, his red eyes sinking deeply. See you again. He should refuse. He should let this ordinary mortal girl leave his world completely, never appear again, and never touch his cursed eternal life. Mortals are short-lived, fragile, and fleeting. Loving a mortal is the most stupid taboo for an immortal vampire. It will bring endless pain and parting, and even bring fatal danger to the mortal. But looking at her warm and bright eyes, he couldn't say the refusal. After a long silence, he nodded slightly, his voice low and hoarse. Okay. A simple word, doomed the eternal forbidden love between them, doomed countless misunderstandings, pains, separations and sacrifices in the future. The mortal girl's warm light broke into his 300 years of endless darkness, and he willingly fell into this doomed love. Chapter 3, Ambiguous Entanglement, the Dangerous Secret Crush. After returning to the town, Lila's heart completely fell on the mysterious Elias. She would take a walk on the edge of the forest every evening, deliberately passing the road leading to the mountain castle, hoping to meet him again by chance. She knew it was dangerous, knew he was not an ordinary person, knew there was an insurmountable gap between them. But she couldn't control her heart. The cold and gentle man who saved her in the rainy night occupied all her thoughts. Noah Carter, her childhood friend, quickly noticed her abnormality. Noah had always been by Lila's side since they were children. He was sunny, gentle and warm, the most suitable person for an ordinary mortal life. He had always loved Lila silently, waiting for her to open her heart. Recently, Lila was always absent-minded, often staring at the direction of the mountain forest in a daze, and her mood fluctuated inexplicably. "Lila, what's wrong with you recently?" Noah stopped her on the campus path, his eyes full of worry. "You've been distracted these days. Are you hiding something from me?" Lila came back to her senses, smiled reluctantly, and shook her head. "Nothing, I'm just a little tired from studying." She couldn't tell anyone about Elias. That was her secret, a dangerous and beautiful secret that belonged only to her. Noah frowned slightly, obviously not believing her words. "Is it because of the forest that you got lost that night?" "Lila, the mountain forest is very dangerous. Don't go there again, okay? I'm worried about you." "I know." Lila nodded, but her heart was not convinced at all. She wanted to see Elias again. She wanted to know more about him, wanted to walk into his cold and lonely world. 3 days later, Lila finally met Elias again. It was dusk, the sunset dyed the sky orange-red, and the mountain forest was covered with soft warm light. Elias stood at the forest entrance, as if waiting for her on purpose. He was still wearing a black long coat, standing quietly in the sunset, cold and out of place with the warm world around him. Lila's heartbeat accelerated instantly, and she walked towards him quickly with uncontrollable joy. "Elias!" She called his name loudly, her voice bright and sweet. Elias raised his eyes, the coldness in his red eyes faded a little, and there was a faint softness that only belonged to her. "You're here. Are you waiting for me?" Lila stood in front of him, her eyes shining brightly, looking up at him. He looked down at her clean smiling face, and after a moment of silence, he answered truthfully, "Yes." He couldn't restrain himself anymore. After she left that day, his empty castle and endless lonely time became more and more difficult to endure. He would stand at the forest entrance every evening, waiting for her figure. He knew he was sinking, knew this was a wrong taboo, but he couldn't stop. The pure blood scent on her body, her warm smile, her soft voice, all of them were the most fatal poison for him, addictive and irresistible. "Why wait for me?" Lila asked softly, her eyes full of expectation. Elias's Adam's apple rolled slightly, and his red eyes stared at her deeply, with suppressed deep affection that he dared not expose. "I want to see you." Simple for words, but hit Lila's heart hard. The sunset fell on their faces, one warm and bright, one cold and pale. The ambiguous atmosphere flowed quietly between them, sweet and trembling. From that day on, they began to meet secretly every day. Every evening, Lila would come to the forest entrance to meet Elias. They would walk along the forest path together, talk about trivial mortal life, listen to Elias talk about the ancient past that no one knew. Elias would carefully avoid all vampire-related secrets, only telling her the beautiful scenery and trivial stories he had seen in hundreds of years of wandering. Lila listened carefully, fascinated by his unique experience and cold and gentle temperament. She gradually found that Elias's coldness was only a superficial disguise. He was lonely, gentle, and affectionate in his bones. He would carefully avoid letting the cold wind blow her, would remember all her small preferences, would silently protect her from all trivial dangers. He never touched her casually, always kept a subtle distance, but gave her the most meticulous protection. Lila's love for him grew deeper day by day. She knew she was falling in love with a dangerous unknown stranger, but she was willing to sink. However, the calm ambiguous sweetness did not last long. On a night when the moon was dark and the wind was high, a gorgeous and charming woman suddenly appeared at the entrance of the mountain castle. She had long wavy golden hair, enchanting red eyes, pale delicate skin, and a cold and cruel smile on her red lips. She stood in front of the castle gate, staring at the warm light in the castle hall, her eyes full of crazy jealousy and cold hatred. Seraphina Blair. She had finally found Elias's hiding place after 100 years of searching. She watched the mortal girl who made Elias sink completely, and the smile on her face became more and more cruel and twisted. Elias, you actually fell in love with a mortal. You abandoned me for 300 years, and now you abandon all your principles for a trivial mortal girl. How ridiculous! I will destroy her. I will destroy all your happiness. I will let you taste the pain of losing everything, just like I did 100 years ago. The bloody crisis is quietly approaching, and the sweet taboo love is about to fall into endless bloody misunderstandings and torture. Chapter 4, The Phantom from His Past. The night breathed cold over Willowbrook. The moon hung low, a thin silver slice hidden behind rolling black clouds, and the mountain forest hummed with the quiet rustle of nocturnal creatures. Inside Elias's ancient castle, firelight flickered softly across stone walls, casting long, gentle shadows that softened the building's centuries-old cruelty. For the first time in 300 years, the house did not feel like a prison. They felt like a home. Lila sat on the velvet settee, her legs curled loosely beneath her, a half-empty mug of warm tea in her hands. Steam curled upward and faded into the crisp air. She was listening to Elias speak, his low, timeless voice weaving stories of old European kingdoms, of oceans he crossed when the world was still young, of starry nights unspoiled by modern light. He never spoke of blood, of hunger, of the curse that chained his soul to darkness. He only gave her the gentle fragments of his immortality, the parts a mortal girl could safely bear. Elias stood by the fireplace, one shoulder resting against the stone mantel. His red eyes were dim in the golden glow, stripped of their usual cold edge. When he looked at her, the centuries of loneliness in his gaze softened, as if she were the only anchor in an endless storm. He'd grown careless lately, careless with his words, careless with his restraint, careless with the sacred distance he'd always kept from humans. Every day with her chipped away at the walls he'd built around his heart. You make the world sound beautiful, Lila murmured, her tone soft and dreamy. She tilted her head, studying his pale features, the sharp jawline, the dark lashes that dusted his cheeks. Sometimes I think you don't belong here at all. Not in this small town, not in this time. Elias's lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. I belong nowhere. Not anymore. The words hung in the air, quiet and heavy. Lila's chest ached for him, for the endless years he'd spent alone, for the pain he hid behind every cold glance. Without thinking, she set her tea down and stood, taking a small step toward him. The space between them shrank, warm and charged. You don't have to be alone anymore, she whispered. Elias's breath caught. His body tensed, every vampire instinct screaming at him to step back, to push her away before he destroyed her. Her blood sang sweet and warm beneath her skin, a temptation no immortal could fully resist. His fangs pricked faintly behind his lips, sharp and hungry, but he forced the craving down. He would never hurt her. Not willingly. Before he could reply, a soft, feminine laugh echoed through the castle's open entrance. The song was honeyed and venomous, winding through the hall like a serpent, cold and familiar. It froze Elias entirely. All the warmth in his gaze vanished in an instant, replaced by ancient, unyielding dread. Lila flinched, turning toward the door. Who's that? No answer came from Elias. His entire frame had gone rigid, his red eyes darkening to the color of dried blood. He stared at the shadow pulling in the castle doorway, his jaw locked tight. A woman stepped into the firelight. She was devastatingly beautiful, the kind of beauty that felt unhuman sharp, polished, eternal. Her golden hair fell in loose, luxurious waves over her shoulders, catching the firelight like spun sunlight. Her eyes were vivid crimson, twin rubies glowing with ancient power and unmasked malice. She wore a long, deep burgundy gown that clung to her figure, the fabric sweeping silently across the stone floor. No footsteps sounded. No breath stirred. She moved like a ghost, silent and deadly. Serafina. She paused in the center of the hall, her gaze sweeping lazily over Lila before returning to Elias, a cruel, knowing smile playing on her red lips. There you are, my love, she purred. I've searched for you for a century. And here you've been, hiding away in this tiny, forgotten town, playing house with a mortal girl. Lila's blood ran cold. Her fingers curled tight at her sides, unease curling sharp and hot in her stomach. The way the woman spoke to Elias, the familiarity in her tone, the possessiveness clinging to every word, there was history here. A painful, buried history Elias had never once mentioned. Elias stepped forward quickly, positioning himself partially in front of Lila, a silent barrier. His voice was low, dangerous, edged with a fury Lila had never heard before. Leave. Now, Serafina. Serafina's smile widened, mocking and bitter. Leave. After I've crossed continents to find you. After I've grieved your abandonment for 100 years. You left me to rot in the dark, Elias. You erased me. And now you dare to tell me to leave. She took a slow step closer, her red eyes never leaving his face. You left me for the curse. You said immortality left no room for love. You said we were both monsters who deserved nothing but eternal solitude. But look at you now. Her gaze flicked to Lila, sharp and dissecting, full of unbridled jealousy. Look at your fragile little human toy. Soft, warm, temporary. Everything I am not. She is not a toy, Elias snarled, his voice dropping to a lethal growl. Do not speak of her. Serafina laughed again, the sound cold and hollow. Oh, you fallen. Truly fallen. The great, cold Elias was, the pure-blood vampire who swore never to bond with any living thing, loves a mortal. The word hung in the fiery air, heavy and damning. Lila's heart shattered open. Her breath stuttered in her throat, her eyes wide and burning. Loves. The woman had said it like a fact, like something obvious, something Elias had been hiding all along. All their quiet evenings, their soft glances, his gentle protection, it was love. But if he loved her, why had he never said a word? Why had he kept her a secret from his past? Serafina watched the confusion flicker across Lila's face and fed on it, her smile turning sweeter and more poisonous. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew how to crack open the fragile trust between them, how to turn tenderness into doubt. You must wonder why he never told you about me, little one, Serafina said, tilting her head. We were lovers once. For 200 years. We ruled the night together. We were equals. Until your precious Elias decided his curse was too heavy to share. Until he decided to run and hide and pretend his darkness didn't exist. Lila's gaze darted to Elias, searching for denial. But his face was closed off, rigid with guilt and rage. He did not refute a single word. Pain flared hot and sharp in Lila's chest. Is it true? She whispered, her voice trembling. Were you with her? Elias's jaw tightened. It was a long time ago. A different life. But it was true, Lila repeated, her tone breaking. All the quiet hope she'd nurtured these past weeks wavered, fraying at the edges. He'd hidden this from her. hidden the woman who once owned his heart, the ghost who haunted his immortality. Seraphina's eyes glinted with triumph. She stepped forward again, slow and unafraid, stopping just before Lila. Her voice dropped to a silky, deceptive murmur, meant only for mortal ears. Let me tell you the truth he's too cowardly to say, darling. Mortals don't survive loving Elias. His curse devours everything soft and warm. He'll watch you age. Watch you wither. Watch you die. And when you're gone, he'll bury his grief and find another pretty little human to distract him from his endless dark. She reached out, her cold fingertip brushing lightly over Lila's cheek, and Lila flinched away. I was the first. You will not be the last. Enough! Elias roared. The force of his vampire voice shook the castle windows. Firelight flared wildly on the walls. In an instant, he was beside Lila, shielding her entirely, his red eyes blazing with unbridled fury. The ancient power of his pure bloodline rippled through the air, cold and suffocating, pressing down on every corner of the hall. Leave her out of this, Seraphina. This is between us. Seraphina's expression hardened. The playful cruelty faded, replaced by centuries of bitterness and heartbreak. Between us. There is no us anymore, Elias. Not since you abandoned me. But there will never be you and her either. I won't allow it. You cannot stop it, Elias said, his tone ice cold. I can try, she retorted sharply. I've waited 100 years to ruin your peace. I've waited 100 years to make you feel the same agony you gave me. And I'll start with the thing you love most. Her gaze locked on Lila, clear and deadly. In that moment, Lila understood. This woman would kill her. Not out of hatred for her personally, but out of hatred for Elias's happiness. She was a weapon. A ghost from his past come to burn their fragile future to ash. Before anyone could speak further, Seraphina turned on her heel and vanished into the night, her figure dissolving into the forest shadows without a sound. The castle fell back into silence, heavy and suffocating. Elias's shoulders slouched, the fight draining out of him. He turned to Lila, his red eyes softening, desperate to fix the damage that had been done. But the look on her face stopped him cold. She was hurt. Confused. Afraid. Lila, he began, reaching for her. She stepped back, avoiding his touch. The movement cut him deeper than any blade. Don't, she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Just, don't. She's lying about most of it, Elias said urgently, his voice raw. Our relationship was never what she thinks. It was duty. It was loneliness. It was never love. But it was something, Lila argued, her voice breaking. You loved someone else once, Elias. You had a whole life you never told me about. How am I supposed to trust that I'm not just another distraction? Another mistake you leave behind when you're tired of me. You are nothing like her, he swore, stepping closer again, his tone desperate. You are different. You are. I'm mortal, Lila interrupted bitterly. That's what I am. Temporary. Fragile. Expendable. Exactly like she said. Tears spilled down her cheeks, warm and bright. You outlive me. You watch me die. And then you move on. Just like you moved on from her. Elias stared at her, his chest splitting open with pain. He could not deny her words. He could not lie about the truth of their fates. Mortals faded. Immortals remained. No love could bridge that gap forever. The silence that followed was answer enough. Lila closed her eyes, swallowing her tears, forcing herself to breathe through the agony in her chest. When she opened them again, her gaze was distant, wounded, withdrawn. I need to go home, she said quietly. Lila, wait. Please, she whispered. Just take me back to town. Elias's shoulders fell. He knew better than to push her when she was hurting. Without another word, he nodded, his expression hollow with defeat. The warm, fragile peace they built together had shattered in a single night. And the worst part was he knew Seraphina was only just beginning. Chapter 5, The Seeds of Misunderstanding. The walk back down the mountain was silent and cold. No laughter passed between them. No soft glances. No quiet words. The night wind swept through the trees, sharp and biting, carrying the distant hoot of an owl and the rustle of disturbed leaves. Every step felt heavier than the last, each moment a reminder of the rift that had opened between them. Elias walked a small distance behind Lila, his usual confidence gone. He watched her hunched shoulders, her quiet, defeated posture, and hated himself. He should have told her about Seraphina long ago. Should have explained his past, his curses, his fears. But he'd been selfish. He wanted to keep her pure, mortal world separate from his dark, bloody one. He wanted to protect her from his monsters only to let the worst monster of all walk straight into their lives. When they reached the edge of town, Lila stopped. She turned to face him, her eyes red-rimmed but steady, no longer crying. "I think we should stop seeing each other for a while," she said quietly. Elias's blood ran cold. "Lila, no. Don't do this. Don't let her win." "It's not about winning or losing," she replied, her voice tired. "It's about truth. I don't know what's real anymore, Elias. I don't know who you are." "I'm the man who loves you," he said, the words rough and unguarded, spoken for the first time out loud. "That's who I am." Lila flinched like she'd been struck. Her breath caught, and for a long moment she just stared at him, her brown eyes swimming with emotion, longing, doubt, fear. "If you loved me," she whispered, "you would have told me the truth from the start. You wouldn't have hidden your past. You wouldn't have let me fall for a version of you that doesn't fully exist." Before Elias could argue, she turned and walked away, her steps quick and determined, disappearing into the town's dim streetlights before he could stop her. Elias stood alone in the dark, frozen in place. The mortal warmth of her presence faded with every step she took, leaving him drowning in his usual cold solitude. His red eyes darkened with rage and despair. Seraphina had done exactly what she'd set out to do. She planted doubt in Lila's heart. She poisoned their love before it could fully bloom. And worse, she wasn't finished. The next few days passed in agonizing silence. Lila avoided the mountain forest entirely. She stopped taking evening walks. She stayed on campus after class, buried herself in homework, and clung to the normalcy of her mortal life. Noah noticed her shift immediately. He noticed her quiet sadness, the way she zoned out mid-conversation, the way her smile never reached her eyes anymore. He showed up at her dorm every afternoon with coffee, with snacks, with gentle, quiet patience. He never pushed her to talk, never demanded answers. He just stayed, steady and warm, the constant human presence Elias could never be. "You've been really quiet lately," Noah said one evening, sitting beside her on the campus lawn as the sun set. "Did something happen that night in the woods? The night you got lost?" Lila stared out at the green lawn, at the other students laughing and talking nearby, at the ordinary, happy life she always wanted. Her throat tightened. "Yeah," she admitted softly. "Something happened." Noah turned toward her, his gaze gentle and concerned. "You can tell me anything, Lila. You know that. I'm always on your side." The words were safe, comforting, human. Lila's eyes stung. For a moment she wanted to tell him everything: the mysterious immortal man in the castle, the forbidden late-night talks, the beautiful terrifying vampire woman from his past. She wanted to unload the weight of her secret love, to let someone ordinary understand her pain. But she couldn't. She couldn't drag Noah into Elias's dark, dangerous world. She couldn't risk Seraphina turning her wrath onto someone innocent. So she just shook her head. "It's complicated. I don't really understand it myself." Noah hesitated, then reached out and covered her hand with his own. His touch was warm, solid, alive, the kind of touch Elias could never give her. Whatever it is, he said firmly, you don't have to carry it alone. I'm here. Always. Lila's heart ached. She knew Noah loved her. Had loved her for years. He was everything safe and stable and right. He was the life she was supposed to want. Normal. Human. Forever within reach. But her heart belonged to the cold immortal on the mountain. The dangerous one. The broken one. The one who could never truly be hers. While Lila struggled with her conflicted feelings, Seraphina moved quietly through Willowbrook, weaving her lies like a fine, deadly web. She wandered the town streets at dusk, her golden hair hidden beneath a hood, her vampire features masked by mortal glamour. She spoke to townsfolk, soft and charming, planting small, poisonous rumors. She whispered of strange disappearances in the forest, of blood found on tree trunks, of a cold monster lurking in the mountain castle. Slowly, the town's old superstitions flared back to life. Whispers spread. Fear grew. But Seraphina's true target was not the town. It was Lila's trust. 3 days after her first appearance at the castle, Seraphina found Lila walking alone after class. She approached her in broad daylight, her glamour perfect, appearing as nothing more than a beautiful, sophisticated stranger passing through town. Mind if I walk with you for a moment? Seraphina asked, her tone warm and gentle, nothing like the venomous cruelty she'd shown at the castle. Lila tensed immediately, recognizing her voice despite the disguise. I don't want to talk to you. Seraphina smiled sadly, feigning hurt. I know you dislike me. I don't blame you. I came off terribly the other night. I was angry. Grieving. I spoke out of turn. Lila stared at her warily, stopping on the sidewalk. What do you want? I want you to know the full truth, Seraphina said softly. Not the version Elias will give you. The real one. Lila hesitated. Curiosity warred with fear in her chest. She wanted to know everything. Wanted to understand the man who'd stolen her heart. Seraphina leaned in slightly, her voice lowering to a confidential murmur. Elias's curse isn't just loneliness, Lila. It's bloodlust. Uncontrollable hunger. Every mortal he's ever loved has ended up hurt. Or dead. Lila's breath caught. That's not true. Is it? Seraphina challenged softly. Ask him about the village he destroyed in 1897. Ask him about the mortal girl who loved him before me. The one he drained dry when his curse flared out of control. He won't tell you. He hides his sins behind cold gentleness. Lila's mind spun. Her stomach twisted with dread. She wanted to deny it, wanted to believe Elias was purely good, purely gentle, but doubt crept in, thick and suffocating. He was a vampire. A creature of night and blood. How many terrible things had he done across 300 years? He's different with me, Lila whispered, more to herself than to Seraphina. For now, Seraphina agreed smoothly. But his hunger grows stronger the closer he bonds with you. Your blood is rare, pure, addictive. He's resisting it now, but eventually, he won't be able to anymore. She paused, letting the words sink in before delivering the final, crushing blow. He doesn't love you, Lila. He craves you. You're his cure. His addiction. Nothing more. The words sliced through Lila's heart like a blade. All the sweet moments they shared, the rainy night rescue, the quiet evenings by the fire, his soft whispers, his careful restraint twisted into something ugly and selfish in her mind. What if it had never been love? What if it had only ever been hunger? Seraphina watched her face crumble and smiled to herself, invisible and cold. She planted the seed. Now she would wait for it to grow. Think about it, she said gently. Ask yourself why he's always cold. Why he never stays with you after dark. Why he never lets you get too close. He's afraid. Not of losing you. Of hurting you. Before Lila could respond, Seraphina turned and walked away, blending into the crowd of students like she'd never been there at all. Lila stood frozen on the sidewalk, her world tilting off its axis. Every beautiful memory she clung to now felt tainted, uncertain, dangerous. And worst of all, she had no one to ask. No way to know what was truth and what was lie. Chapter 6, Jealousy, Blood and False Evidence. Elias grew desperate in the days that followed. He waited for Lila every evening at the forest entrance, standing in the fading light, hoping to catch sight of her figure. But she never came. The forest path remained empty. The town stayed quiet. She was avoiding him completely, cutting him out of her life entirely, and the distance gnawed at his sanity. He knew Seraphina was poisoning her mind. Knew the lies were sinking in, rooting deep in Lila's mortal heart. But he could not force Lila to listen. Could not force her to trust him. Trust had to be earned, and Seraphina was burning every bridge before he could rebuild it. Worse, Seraphina's attacks were growing bolder. One night, Elias caught her hunting on the edge of his territory, her fangs bared, her crimson eyes glowing in the dark. She drained a stray animal, leaving its broken body on the forest path, a clear message. A warning. Stop this, Elias snarled, confronting her beneath the shadowed trees. Leave her alone. Your fight is with me. Seraphina turned to him, her lips stained faintly with blood, her expression wild and furious. My fight is with the happiness you stole from me. You think I'll let you live peacefully with a mortal child while I rot alone for eternity? You chose your darkness, Elias replied coldly. I never forced you into anything. You abandoned me into it. She snapped. You left me with nothing but memories of you. And now you dare to love someone else. It's unfair. It's cruel. Elias stared at her, exhausted by her centuries-old grudge. Immortality is cruel. That is the curse we bear. You know that better than anyone. Then why does she get to be happy? Seraphina hissed. Why does she get your warmth? Your devotion? Your mercy? Before Elias could answer, Seraphina vanished again, leaving only the faint scent of blood and rage hanging in the forest air. Elias knew then that she would not stop with words. She would act. She would create proof. She would give Lila a reason to hate him completely. The trap snapped shut 2 nights later. It was late. Lila had stayed on campus late to finish a paper, walking home alone through the dimly lit town streets. The night was quiet, the air cool, the sky dotted with faint stars. She spent all day trying to push thoughts of Elias and Seraphina from her mind, trying to focus on normalcy, on Noah's steady kindness, on the simple mortal life she once craved. But her heart still ached for the vampire on the mountain. As she turned down a quiet side street, a low, pained groan cut through the silence. Lila froze. Hello? No answer. Another weak, wounded sound. Against her better judgment, Lila stepped forward, peering into the shadowed alley between 2 brick buildings. And what she saw made her blood turn to ice. Noah lay crumpled on the concrete ground, his head tilted back, blood streaming down his neck and shoulder. His eyes were closed, his face pale and clammy, his breath shallow and ragged. A deep, vicious wound tore through the skin of his throat, bleeding heavily onto the pavement beneath him. No! Lila screamed, rushing forward and dropping to her knees beside him. Panic exploded through her chest. She pressed her hands frantically to his wound, trying to stop the bleeding, hot tears spilling down her face. Stay with me. Please stay with me. She sobbed. Noah, hold on. Noah did not stir. His pulse was weak beneath her fingers, his body growing colder by the second. And then she heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, familiar footsteps. Lila's head snapped up. Elias stood at the mouth of the alley, his tall frame shadowed by night. His black coat was dark and still, his pale face half hidden in darkness. But what Lila saw first, what burned itself into her vision, was the fresh, wet blood staining his fingertips. Red. Bright. Unmistakable. He stood frozen, his red eyes wide with shock, his entire body rigid with disbelief. He'd sensed blood, sensed mortal injury, and rushed to the scene only to walk straight into a perfect, brutal trap. Lila stared at him, her eyes wide and shattered, every ounce of trust she had left crumbling into ash. "You did this," she whispered, her voice hollow and broken. Elias stepped forward quickly, panic flaring in his crimson eyes. "Lila, no, this isn't what it looks like. I didn't hurt him." "Then why is your hand covered in his blood?" Lila cried, her voice rising into a broken shout. "Why are you here? Why is he dying?" Elias's mind raced, desperate for an explanation, for a way to fix this. "I smelled blood. I came to help. I tried to heal him." "Heal him?" Lila laughed bitterly, tears streaming down her face. "You mean you almost drained him? Don't lie to me. Don't you dare lie to me again." Everything Serafina had told her flooded back in a violent rush. The lies about his bloodlust. The stories of dead mortals. The warnings that he would hurt everyone she loved. She refused to believe it before. Refused to accept that the gentleman who'd saved her, who'd spoken softly to her, who looked at her like she was precious, could be a monster. But now she saw it. The blood on his hands. The wounded boy at her feet. The darkness clinging to his figure in the night. "You were jealous," Lila whispered, her voice sharp and devastated. "You saw me with Noah. You saw me choosing normalcy. And you hurt him. Because you're selfish. Because you're a monster." Elias's chest shattered. He'd endured 300 years of hatred, 300 years of fear, 300 years of solitude, but nothing hurt like the look in her eyes in that moment. Pure, unbridled hatred. Fear. Disgust. "Lila, I swear to you," he said, his voice raw and broken, "I would never hurt anyone you love. Not ever." "But you did." She screamed. "He's dying, Elias. Because of you." Behind Elias's shoulder, hidden in the distant shadows, Serafina stood watching. Her red eyes glinted with cold triumph. She sliced Noah's throat with her own vampire claws, drank just enough blood to leave him dying, then fled the scene moments before Elias arrived. She staged the perfect crime. She'd given Lila irrefutable proof of the monster beneath Elias's gentle mask. And Elias could not defend himself. He had no witnesses. No proof. Only his word against the evidence, and Lila no longer believed his word. Sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder, echoing through the quiet town streets. Someone had heard her screams. Someone had called for help. Elias knew he could not stay. If the humans found him here, covered in blood, beside a dying boy, there would be no saving this situation. No explaining it. The town would hunt him. They would come for Lila too, for associating with a monster. But leaving meant letting the lie stand. Letting Lila believe he was a killer. He stared at her, desperate, begging with his eyes. "Lila, please. Trust me one last time." Lila stared back at him, her face streaked with tears, her heart broken beyond repair. "I can't," she whispered. "I can never trust you again." The words killed him. With a sharp, agonized breath, Elias turned and fled into the night, vanishing into the forest shadows before the police arrived. He left behind blood, chaos, and the shattered remains of the only love he ever allowed himself to have. As his figure disappeared, Serafina slid silently away from the shadows, a cold, satisfied smile on her lips. The game was working perfectly. The lovers were broken. The trust was destroyed. And soon, Elias would have nothing left but his eternal darkness, just like her. Chapter 7, Shattered Trust and Lonely Sorrow. The days following the attack blurred together in a haze of grief and pain for Lila. Noah was rushed to the town hospital, hanging between life and death for 48 hours. Doctors worked frantically to stabilize his wounds, baffled by the strange, clean, almost surgical nature of the injury. No knife marks, no animal bites, nothing explainable by mortal means. They called it a random violent assault, a senseless town crime. No leads, no witnesses, no suspects. Only Lila knew the truth. Or what she believed was the truth. She sat by Noah's hospital bed every hour, holding his hand, watching his unconscious face, drowning in guilt and sorrow. If she hadn't gotten involved with Elias. If she'd never wandered into the forest that rainy night. If she'd chosen the safe, ordinary life Noah had always given her, none of this would have happened. Noah would not be fighting for his life. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elias standing in the alley, blood on his hands, red eyes glowing in the dark. Every time she breathed, she remembered his lies, his hidden past, Seraphina's poisonous words echoing in her ears. He was a monster. She loved a monster. And yet even through all the pain and fear, small, stubborn fragments of hope remained. The memory of his gentleness. The way he'd saved her life. The quiet care he'd shown her every night they'd spent together. It conflicted with the horror of what had happened, tearing her heart in two. She wanted to hate him completely. Wanted to erase every soft feeling she'd ever harbored for him. But she could not. Meanwhile, Elias unraveled in the solitude of his castle. He cleaned the blood from his hands hours ago, scrubbed at his skin until it was raw, but he could still feel it. Still feel the warmth of Noah's mortal blood, the faint scent of fear and pain clinging to his senses. He'd arrived too late to stop Seraphina's trap. Too late to protect Lila from the truth she'd been forced to believe. The castle was darker than ever before. Colder. Empty. The faint warmth Lila had brought into his centuries-old prison was gone, snuffed out in one brutal night. Elias stood before the tall castle window, staring out at the fog-shrouded forest, his red eyes dull and hollow. He spent 300 years believing loneliness was his punishment, his inevitable fate. He accepted it calmly, endured it silently, convinced he deserved nothing more than endless night. But after tasting Lila's warmth, after loving her openly and desperately, loneliness was no longer bearable. It was torture. Seraphina appeared in his hall hours later, uninvited, her steps silent and triumphant. You lost her, she said simply, leaning against the stone wall, her eyes glinting with cruel satisfaction. She hates you now. Truly hates you. Elias did not turn to face her. His voice was flat, dead, devoid of all emotion except bone-deep weariness. You almost killed an innocent mortal. I almost killed your happiness, Seraphina corrected sweetly. There's a difference. And I'd do it again. 100 times over. 1,000. She pushed off the wall and walked closer, stopping directly behind him, her cold breath brushing his ear. You thought you could escape me. Escape our fate. But we're the same, Elias. We're monsters. We don't get soft mortal love. We don't get happy endings. Elias finally turned, his red eyes blazing with quiet fury. I am nothing like you. Aren't you? She laughed softly. You crave blood. You live in darkness. You outlive everyone you love. The only difference between us is that I accept what I am. You pretend to be good. You pretend to be gentle. But deep down, you're just as broken, just as dangerous, just as cursed. Her words cut deep because there was truth in them. Terrible, undeniable truth. Elias was dangerous. His curse was deadly. Any mortal who loved him was at risk. Lila had already paid the price for loving him. Noah had nearly died for it. For a long, terrible moment, Elias wondered if Seraphina was right. If he truly was nothing but a destroyer of mortal joy. Leave my castle, he said coldly. Or I will kill you. Seraphina's smile faded. Her eyes sharpened with ancient anger. You can try, she whispered. But remember this. Every time you reach for happiness, I will burn it down. Every time you love, I will destroy. I will haunt you for the rest of your eternal life. You will never be free of me. With that threat hanging heavy in the air, she vanished once more, leaving Elias alone in the freezing dark. Down in the town, dawn broke pale and gray over the hospital rooftops. Noah finally woke. His eyes fluttered open slowly, weary with medication and exhaustion. The first thing he saw was Lila's tear-streaked face, hovering over his bed, her expression tight with worry and relief. "Lila," he whispered weakly. Lila burst into fresh tears, clutching his hand tightly. "You're awake. Thank God you're awake." Noah squeezed her fingers gently, his voice hoarse. "I'm okay, don't cry. I'm right here." He frowned slightly, trying to recall the attack, his brows furrowing in confusion. I don't remember much," he admitted slowly. "It was dark. Something fast. Cold. Not human." Lila's heart skipped a beat. "Not human." The words echoed in her mind, stirring doubt again. A small, flickering doubt that refused to die. But before she could process it, Noah spoke again, soft and sincere. "Whoever did this, don't blame yourself. It's not your fault." Lila looked at him, the boy who loved her loyally for years, who'd nearly died because of her secrets and her guilt crashed over her in waves. "It is my fault," she thought. "All of it. If I hadn't loved Elias. If I hadn't walked into the dark." Noah's warm fingers brushed her cheek, wiping away her tears gently. "I'm okay," he repeated softly. "You're safe. That's all that matters to me." Lila closed her eyes, letting the tears fall, her heart split clean in two. One half still ached for the cold vampire on the mountain. The other half drowned in guilt for the boy who loved her truly, safely, humanly. The forbidden love she chased so desperately had only brought pain, chaos, and near death to everyone she cared about. Maybe Serafina was right. Maybe loving Elias was a curse in itself.